In a week where UK cinemas confirmed the plan to reopen their doors, Liverpool won at some football, and the nation rejoiced at the possibility of a haircut next weekend. What else would you need from a film podcast and two blokes talking about the man who Hollywood are arguably building their entire return to action around? Hello, wherever you are listening or watching, and welcome to the season finale of the Rip Ticket Review, a movie podcast conceived during the height of lockdown that's been delayed about as much as the release of Tenet. I'm TheJackSmit, and joining me over the power of the internet one more time to discuss the work of Christopher Nolan is The Dark Knight to My Dark Knight Rises. Good afternoon, Dan Carver.
Hi, good afternoon, Jack. Yes, we are indeed talking about Christopher Nolan, a man who has done so much for film. It's just incredible. I mean, he's been taught in film schools, for crying out loud. His work is being used as inspiration for directors, and who can blame him? I mean, he's done some incredible things. He's responsible for making Batman relevant again.
Yep.
He is responsible for one of the most boldest science fiction films out there, or two of them, isn't there? There was Interstellar, and then there was before that Inception.
Yes.
And now, of course, we've got his new film coming out very, very soon.
August 12th is currently where it stands, but that could move. Tenet is, of course, the next major release. A lot of talk in the air about that movie. And, of course, the big thing, I've seen the big 450 movie list that the cinemas have been allowed to reopen with. Every single Christopher Nolan film is on that list. So that tells you a lot about how Hollywood regard him. But we're going to look back at his career over the last 20 plus years, from early beginnings, of course, building up to release Tenet. We're kind of doing this podcast at the right time because Odeon start opening cinemas up next weekend. View to follow on July 10th. So let's get cracking.
Indeed you do. And, where to begin. But in the beginning, dear listener, our story begins in 1998. Well, no, our story begins on 30th July 1970, because that's when Christopher Nolan was born. He is known for making personal films within the Hollywood mainstream, very distinctive films as well. And he first started off in 1998 with his debut feature, Following, which tells the story of a young man who follows strangers around the streets of London and is drawn into the criminal underworld, where he tries to keep a distance and fails. It was his debut feature. He designed it to be as inexpensive as possible, because it was like in his first feature, he couldn't afford all the flashy effects we would see in later films. And as a result of this, he was unable to afford too much 60mm film stock. So in order to economize the film stock, the scenes were heavily rehearsed, so there was only one or two takes were needed to make the film. It was, something that Nolan was paying from his salary, the 60mm film.
$3,000. This film was made for $3,000.
Yeah, and the reception of that was generally positive. Rotten Tomatoes have smacked it with an 81% fresh. And, a lot of people really saw there a talent for type filmmaking and hard-edge noir, as the site consensus agreed. And we saw, the idea of noir, this sort of neo-noir, would prop up again and again and again and again in films. And then he went from his feature film debut to his second film, Memento. One of my top favourite films. If you've never watched Memento, stop listening to this.
Go and watch it. The Guardian have literally said it's one of those films you immediately want to see again. It is a film that you have to watch a few times to really understand it, because it does some very, very complex things with a narrative which a lot of people don't really understand at first, because you have your black and white sequences. It plays with the idea you've got this man who's got amnesia. He doesn't remember much, and he tattoos himself to try and remember what he did, what he got up to. It's a very unique plot, so stereotypically Nolan, and it was his first major Hollywood breakthrough. He worked with a lot of his collaborators for the time, including his cinematographer of 15 years plus. He doesn't work with him anymore, a chap by the name of Wally Pfister. Been looking forward to saying that name all week. But Memento is it's an amazing film. I cannot speak highly of it. It is just so good.
Yeah, based on the short story by his brother Jonathan Nolan, Memento Mori. Memento, released in 2000, starring Guy Pearce in perhaps his greatest role ever. As you said, it is about a man who has amnesia. He is unable to remember anything for more than a few hours at a time, and the film plays chronologically backwards. We see the main character, who his name's Leonard Shelby.
Yeah.
And he manages to get revenge. In the first scene, it's in what can only be described as a very unusual, and I think today the only movie that's done this. And I'm opening myself up there. Correct me if I'm wrong, but because there was another movie, the French one, the French revenge one.
Oh, I can't remember it off the top of my head. I will look it up and probably stick it into the listen again version.
Yeah. But it starts off with Leonard as he shoots a man in the head. We're told that the man is the killer of his wife, and then it works backwards to see how Leonard got to that point. And the story is so full of twists and turns. It is unbelievable. You know, one scene you think you've got it all, and then suddenly, bam, the next scene comes up, and you're like, wow, that's just thrown me through a loop. It is a brilliant neo-noir thriller, absolutely fantastic. I consider it a masterpiece in crime neo-noir filmmaking. If you've not watched it, watch it. Jack is right, you do need to watch it several times. But unlike many, many movies that have that sort of thing, where you have to watch it several times to get it, Memento, you can just watch it once and it's absolutely brilliant.
Or if you're quite tackling the way you get the DVD, because some of the DVD versions of it do have a version of the film in chronological order, but it's not as good that way. Watch the proper cinema cut.
No, exactly.
If your local cinema has it, watch it on a big screen, safely and responsibly, of course.
Yes, keep making sure to keep the
1 meter plus. It'll be 1 meter plus by the time the back open.
That's it. But yeah, don't watch it chronologically. Whatever you do, watch it the way it was made. It was fantastic. It received an amazing critical reaction. It's 93% Rotten Tomatoes, based on 176 review, average rating of 8.2.10. And basically, one review here, the critical consensus: Christopher Nolan skillfully guides the audience through Memento's fractured narrative, seeping his film in existential dread. Like I say, it was ranked. Many film critics put it at the top of their year list. So go watch. If you've never watched Memento, seriously, you are robbing yourself of that opportunity. Watch it. Get it off a shop online, buy it on DVD, and just watch it. It is brilliant. He then transitioned from independent filmmaking to studio filmmaking with Insomnia.
Yep,
the 2002 American psychological thriller, which I've not actually seen before.
Neither have I.
No, it's not as very well known, I think, because of the next film, but it tells the story of two Los Angeles homicide detectives investigating a murder in Nightmute, Alaska. Again, it shows the themes of neo-noir. And Lou Limerick of the New York Post gave the film an enthusiastic review. He said it was a 4-course gourmet alternative to summer popcorn flicks, serving up the meatiest performances Al Pacino and Robin Williams have given in many years.
It is also an important point because Steven Soderbergh was involved in this movie. It was his production company who made it. And Warner Brothers were insistent of getting a director who was a little bit more well-known at that time, because obviously Nolan had been doing a couple of independent movies. He'd done Memento, he'd done a couple of short films at university. But Soderbergh was insistent on Nolan because he's seen talent, and Nolan's gone on record and said Soderbergh was quite a key figure in that transition from independent to Hollywood, and it was one of the biggest budgets he's had at that point. It was a $46 million film. It played pretty well, but of course it set the wheels in motion within Warner. They all said, we've got a unique talent in Christopher Nolan, we've got a good cinematographer with Wally, you've got a great editing team. Why don't we trust you with one of our most beloved properties after other directors had run it into the ground? Why don't we give you Batman? And he was in that moment, Nolan was like, I want to do something a little bit different with Batman. Insomnia, a lot of people see as like, it was the precursor to Batman Begins, because he spent the next 3 years working on that movie and laying the seeds for what would become one of the greatest superhero trilogies of all time.
Indeed. Now, to understand how big Batman Begins is, we had to take a time travel back into the world of superhero movies. Batman has always been America's most popular hero. I think Superman is the most well-known. Batman is the most popular. And the rise of cinema and Batman began with the 88, 89 Batman
89
movie.
Tim Burton, yeah.
That's it, Tim Burton movie. And then it saw to Batman Returns. It was then passed over to the sadly now late Joel Schumacher, who made Batman Forever, which was a more kid-friendly version of the Batman franchise. And that was what Warner wanted, because there was a massive issue with Tim Burton's movies in that the McDonald's was firing off Happy Meal toys, advertising this movie to kids.
And it was the very first 12 certificate movie in the UK. That tells you everything.
It was not a kid's movie. So I think Warner was saying that these are good, but we're kind of looking for a more kid-friendly. Tim Burton was like, not happening. And Joel Schumacher was like, yes, it is happening, and created Batman Forever, which was far more safe. And then came Batman and Robin. Now, I believe Batman and Robin has aged quite gracefully enough now to be looked back at as in an academically sort of a way, and to say, actually, it is a terrible movie, but now that we have like the Marvel Cinematic Universe and we've had the Batman trilogy, it's not as horrific as we remember. I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that Batman and Robin sadly killed superhero movies. It was cheesy, it was campy, the actors hated it. Joel Schumacher went a bit too crazy with the whole kid-friendly, and who remembers the bat nipples, the backside, the back crotches, you know. But you know what? I think it's now. I hereby declare it so bad it's good.
Yeah. I can agree on that one.
It's so bad it's good. In the same vein as something like The Room, because we have better movies, the aforementioned movies of the Avengers, of Batman and of the Batman trilogy, and also we've seen Batman v Superman, which was pretty bad. You know, and I think that was that's now the new low point for Batman. Batman and Robin, I'd happily watch that again and laugh at it. It's a great time. I mean, Joel Schumacher apologized profusely for the movie. George Clooney offered to give refunds for the movie. That's how bad it was. So Batman was kind of on the dark pile. Warner Brothers saw Christopher Nolan, and the cynic in me wants to say, do you know what? He's an up-and-comer. He's not had many movies. If he blows this, it's not going to be so bad. Batman will just be sunk. He can go back to indie movies. If it works well, brilliant. And that's what happened. And you were right, Christopher Nolan did something different. He decided to take it back to the beginning.
Yeah.
Batman Begins. And in this movie, we learn how Batman became, his motivations, and how he got his equipment. This was the first time a superhero movie had gone into such detail, because it was expected. We had like the Spider-Man movies, didn't we?
Yeah. And
that went into some detail, and that's why they were successful. In the sense, Spider-Man movies were successful because we saw like the origin story. But the thing is, the origin stories were always rushed to get to the main event, which is the superhero. I don't think we see Batman until at least halfway through the movie in this.
Yeah,
Batman Begins.
From what I remember, they spend a good chunk of the film just setting up the backstory and doing it in a way that a lot of audiences have joked about since, because obviously we've seen quite a few of the Batman origin stories over the years. Same with Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Obviously, this film came out the year after Spider-Man 2, which a lot of people regard as one of the better superhero movies of the time. For Nolan to come in and literally throw the rule book into a $200 million budget and make something that's not only dark, brooding, but also gets the character tonally right as well. It was the kick in the ass that Warner needed to get this, what we now know to be the DCEU going, even though it's not technically part of the DCEU for some complex reason. But Nolan did to the superhero film. I mean, we talked about it when we did The Crow. If something like The Crow hadn't been made back in '94, we wouldn't have had a movie like The Dark Knight. There is always a movie that comes in and changes the game for the genre forever. And The Crow did it in '94. Every 20 years, there seems to be a movie that changes the status quo for every superhero film in the world. This
Sweet,
is one
four
of
more years, 4 more years. And yeah, you're absolutely right. And the thing about Batman Begins, what makes it brilliant, is that there were comic book storylines that we used as inspiration. You had The Man Who Falls, Batman Year One, which is probably the biggest inspiration, Batman The Long Halloween. They all served as an inspiration. But what Nolan did is he wanted to create a darker and more realistic tone compared to the films. He wanted to explain, he wanted to ground this Batman in reality. He wanted to essentially create a hero that we could relate to. That was their primary goal, to engage the audience's emotional investment in the character. And it was a gamble, because it was Batman, and people were thinking, no. I remember thinking to myself, I don't think Batman, is this going to work? How is this going to work? What if it's even worse than Batman and Robin? And then it came out on June the 15th, 2005, and it received banging reviews, highly positive reviews, critics praising the tone, critics praising Christian Bale's performance as Bruce Wayne. And he is one of the better Bruce Waynes out there. And critics praising Gary Oldman. Who else have we got here? I'm just having a look at the cast.
We've got Michael Caine as Alfred Pennyworth.
Yeah, Michael Caine,
legend.
Liam Neeson.
Yeah, Liam Neeson as well.
Yep. Katie Holmes as Rachel Dawes before
Morgan
Scientology followed her up. Gary Oldman as James Gordon. Cillian Murphy as Dr. Jonathan Crane, the Scarecrow. Tom Wilkinson, British actor Tom Wilkinson as Carmine the Roman Falcone. Rutger Hauer, one of my favourite actors, again joining the club of the late actors, as William Earl, CEO as Enterprises, and of course Ken Watanabe as Rish Al Ghul. And Christopher Nolan would go on to work with several of these actors.
Yeah, Michael Caine's the one that really stands out on that list, because Caine has been a part of every single Nolan movie that's been made in Hollywood. He's part of Tenet. Obviously, we'll get to the other films in a little bit, but Michael Caine, you're watching a Christopher Nolan film when you see Michael Caine pop up.
Definitely.
It's always a good moment.
I read the interview as well for how Christopher Nolan asked Michael Caine to be a part of the movie, because Christopher Nolan rocked up to Michael Caine's house and handed Michael Caine the script, and Michael Caine, being Michael Caine, was like, "Oh, I'll have a look at it and I'll get back to you." And Christopher Nolan was like, "No, I really need an answer like right now because it's big." And so he invites Christopher Nolan in, gives him a cup of tea, looks at the script, sees the bat logo signal on the front of it, and Michael Caine realizes, oh, yes. And yeah, the movie again. Christian Bale was a brilliant Batman. The negatives about this were obviously, the only thing I think that was bad about this movie was the bat voice. The bat voice was terrible. I don't know what it is with Christopher Nolan and people in masks. Nobody with a mask in this film could be understood. I didn't get what the Scarecrow was saying. The bat voice seemed to change as Bruce was trying to find his perfect bat voice. It was that's the only bad thing about this. But the movie itself was brilliant. It was the Batman movie that we wanted. It was marketable to kids because it wasn't violent, but it was adult enough that adults could watch it. And honestly, at that point, Christopher Nolan was like, "I'm sorry, there's not going to be a sequel. I'm
it's
not
a one and done
on
film. I'm not coming back to it.
I'm not coming back to it at all." And people were like, "No, we want a sequel. We want a sequel. We really do." In 2006, Nolan released The Prestige, a psychological thriller, and again starring Christian Bale and Hugh Jackman, as they are following two stage musicians in London obsessed with creating the best stage illusion, and they create in a competitive one-man upmanship. With pretty bad results, and it received positive views, and it was a moderate box office success. It received an Academy Award nomination for Best Cinematography and Best Art Direction, and it was one of 3 movies to explore the world of stage magicians, along with The Illusionist and Scoop. But people were still begging for a Batman sequel.
Yeah,
they were, and in 2008, it happened.
Yes.
Jack, take the reins, my friend. I've been speaking for far too long. Take the reins.
In 2008, after many years of development, Christopher Nolan would return to the Batman franchise with a movie that would not only break the hearts of people with some good depictions of characters, but also, again, change the game in terms of the way films are made. The Dark Knight was one of the first major movies to not only have saturation day and date release for the rest of the world, just to make sure nobody pirated it or nobody leaked it, but it also received one of the first IMAX releases. Now, Nolan has been an advocate for the IMAX camera systems for many years now. He's also been an advocate for shooting on old school film. That's why they're making a big deal out of the release of Tenet right now. But The Dark Knight, well, the hype in 2008 was unreal. I remember going into the local cinema, seeing all the posters and staff were gathering around. What do we know about this film? What do we know about this film? And then it came out and audiences lapped this movie up. It built on what had been laid down in Batman Begins by introducing new characters. You get Harvey Two-Face introduced for the first time. You have bigger, more explosive action sequences. Hans Zimmer turned his music up to 11. And of course, we get one of the greatest performances ever seen on film. Heath Ledger as the Joker. This is Christopher Nolan being peak Christopher Nolan with this movie.
This is Christopher Nolan essentially learning everything he had learned from his craft and putting it on the screen. We'd already got the origin story. We knew who Batman was. We were now emotionally invested in the character. Let's put him up against somebody unpredictable like the Joker. And like you say, the Heath Ledger's performance is untouched. There is a debate about who is the best Joker at the moment, Heath Ledger or who's the guy who did the Joker?
Joaquin Phoenix,
Phoenix. Yeah, like I consider that to be the ultimate grudge match. I still can't make up my mind about who's the better Joker. I actually think the more I think about it, the more I to Heath Ledger, because Heath Ledger's Joker had a Batman to play against, whereas Joaquin Phoenix was on his own.
Story,
we never really got to see. But The Dark Knight has been arguably considered one of the greatest, if not the greatest, superhero movies ever to be created. This was the movie that basically said, no, superhero movies can be a thing again. They can be a thing, because everyone was looking at this and thinking to themselves, well, hang on a minute, is Heath Ledger as the Joker? I just can't see it, because Heath Ledger was very much known for his good guy roles, like in A Knight's Tale, and he looked like a surfer dude. How could he possibly be the Joker? It's going to be very weird. But when you see Heath Ledger on the screen playing the Joker, you are mesmerized and terrified at the same time. Again, taking inspiration from comics, we see things from The Killing Joke and the 1988 graphic novel by Alan Moore, and the 1996 series The Long Halloween, which retold Harvey Dent's origin. We see Batman up against a foe that it thwarts him at every turn. Batman knows all about criminals. He knows how they operate. He has never faced an anarchist like the Joker before, who has absolutely no qualms about explosions and killing to get the job done. And the whole film was absolutely fantastic. Sadly, Heath Ledger never got to see the fruits of his labor.
Never got to hold his Oscar either. Never got to hold his Oscar.
He passed away. Yep, he passed away January the 22nd, 2008, some months after he had completed filming and 6 months before the release, due to a toxic combination of prescription drugs. A lot of people were looking at the movie wondering if the performance had anything to do with it. It didn't. Heath Ledger loved the Joker performance, and there was even talks about how he would reprise that role in the sequel. But sadly, Heath Ledger did pass away, and he did posthumously win an Oscar for the Best Supporting Actor. Robbed. He should have got Best Actor.
Yeah.
Absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, should have got Best Actor. The Dark Knight is considered one of the best films of its decade, one of the best superhero films ever made. I believe it was at this point when Marvel looked towards the movie, looked towards the cinema screen and thought, "Hey,
what would make a universe out of this?
We can do this. Yeah, let's do this. We can do this." So. Yeah, absolutely fantastic.
It was also one of the first movies to gross over $1 billion at the box office. This was really the archetype of the modern Hollywood movie was born with this film. And then, obviously, the loss of Heath Nolan felt that pretty hard. Of course, Nolan actually gave Heath Ledger a lot of free reign on The Dark Knight. Goes a lot of talk about some of the sequences that Heath would film himself that would slot it into the movie, make the character a little bit more believable. But Nolan had this bubbling in the back of his mind to go and make something original. Something that would, again, baffle Hollywood audiences. So, following the success of The Dark Knight, Warner gave Nolan the checkbook and saying, we're going to give you $300 million to make a movie that you want to make. And the result, and I've got a sound effect keyed up for this, because, of course, was Inception. Can't not talk about Inception without having a bwam.
Exactly. Yes, this was something that Nolan had wanted to work on for quite some time. It was 2002, after the completion of Insomnia. Nolan presented the 80-page treatment for a horror film envisioning dream stealers based on lucid dreaming, but he decided that he needed more experience before tackling a production of that magnitude and complexity. And so Nolan put the project on the shelf and decided to work on Batman Begins, The Prestige, and The Dark Knight. Following The Dark Knight's rapid success, because it was very critically well received as not just a superhero movie but a crime movie in its own right, Nolan was essentially seen as the new coming, the second coming of film Jesus, essentially, by Warner Brothers. And so when he decided to go back and work on this on this script and turn it into what we saw as Inception, Warner Brothers just looked at him and went, yeah, name me a price. And the official budget was $160 million, split between Warner Brothers and Legendary, which is Nolan's film company.
Legendary is the production. Syncope is his film company. Legendary co-financed it.
Yeah, Legendary's finance. Sorry, got confused there. Yeah, you're right, Syncope. Nolan's reputation and his success with The Dark Knight helped secure the film's advertising revenue expenditure. As well. And the film itself is completely out of this world. Again, I'm going to be saying this quite a lot. If you haven't watched it, go and watch it. It is a brilliant crime.
It's being reissued on July 31st with footage from Tenet. So again, see it on a big screen safely and responsibly.
I'm going to. The whole film itself revolves. It's a heist movie. Essentially, it is a heist movie, but it takes place in people's dreams.
Yes.
The guy, Dominic Cobb, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, is a professional thief who specializes in conning secrets from his victims by using a device that infiltrates their dreams. And the whole thing is completely and utterly, it's whack, but it's not so whack that you lose interest. You are able to get a grasp of what is happening. And of course, this film, Leonardo DiCaprio, I think used this film as a springboard to get back into the public eye.
Yeah.
Because it was very difficult. You know, everyone remembers Leonardo DiCaprio as the heartthrob in Titanic. And I think he tried to make it into serious movies, didn't he? And people he just couldn't shake it. And then this movie came along, and Leonardo DiCaprio starred in it, and it was brilliant. He was absolutely fantastic. You also had Joseph Gordon-Levitt as Arthur, Cobb's partner, Ellen Page as Ariadne, who was a graduate student of architecture who's recruited to help, Tom Hardy, Ken Watanabe, and Cillian Murphy. Loads of the regulars, along with some new people as well, such as Dilip Rao and Tom Berenger, Michael Caine, of course, returning. And you can, when you have a look at this movie, you can see the tropes of a heist movie.
Yeah.
But it's done in such a way that the whole thing just is original.
I broke this film apart many years ago at college, and a lot of people they were all baffled when they watched it for the first time, because it's quite a complex film, and obviously the ending sequence left the whole room speechless. That's what I shall say on that. But there are the tropes of the heist movie have this call to adventure, and a lot of people argued that the Ellen Page character Ariadne was used as exposition. A lot people made the argument that this was the film that cemented Christopher Nolan as a modern-day auteur. And people seem to be leaning more towards that nowadays, considering not only I would say the word ego he's had on him to release a new movie in the middle of a global pandemic, but just the words a film by Christopher Nolan have become, thanks to this movie, enough to sell something to audiences.
Yeah. Definitely. Christopher Nolan's name is up there now with people like Quentin Tarantino, because his films, you can tell with Quentin Tarantino what sort of films you're going to get. You're mostly going to get ultra violent, focusing on the feet, focusing on some kind of revenge or negative feelings. With Christopher Nolan, you know what you're going to get with him. You're going to get beautiful IMAX visionary films that are typically rooted in epistemological and metaphysical themes, exploring human morality, constructions of time, and the malleable nature of memory and personal identity. You know, you know you're going to get that with Christopher Nolan. He is an auteur. There is no other way around it. He is an auteur. And Inception, again, blew the roof off. 87% Rotten Tomatoes. A+ on the cinema, no, B+ on the cinema score scale. And, you know, people called it smart, innovative, thrilling, even. So, yeah. Definitely go watch it.
To think it came out 10 years ago doesn't feel like it's been that long. Yep.
And then, of course, in let's have a quick look at 2014. I do believe we received.
We've got one film before Interstellar. We've got Dark Knight Rises.
We do. We've skipped the Dark Knight Rises, and I think
a lot of people did. A lot of people did.
Yeah. Now, The Dark Knight Rises, released in 2012, was meant to be the final installment in Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy. Sequel to The Dark Knight, it takes place 8 years after the events of said prequel. The comic book major inspiration for this was 1993's Batman Nightfall series and The Dark Knight Returns and the story No Man's Land. Where Batman faces a formidable villain known as Bane. He comes out of retirement after 8 years to face Bane. Bane ends up breaking Batman's back and throws him into prison. And it's all about basically how Batman has to relearn everything and fights Bane whilst Bane runs amok on the city. Now, a lot of people were looking at this movie and they were like, well, it's the third movie. Is the trilogy curse going to hit? Because you have a really good movie for the first one, an absolute stonker of a movie for the second one, and then the third one is like, yeah. And yes, it did hit, but not as badly as it could have been. I draw attention to the previous comment I made about people in masks, how we can't understand them. I don't know about you, but I didn't understand half of what Bane was saying. Played by Tom Hardy.
We got it much better compared to what audiences who watched the prologue had, because it was completely different on the prologue. They had to go and remix the damn thing.
Yeah.
It does support Chris Nolan's theory that Tom Hardy can act with just his eyebrows.
Oh, yes. So, this, I do believe, was Tom Hardy's big
this was his coming out party for Hollywood. This was his Hollywood coming out party.
Well, it was his second big break, because his first big break was Star Trek Nemesis, and that failed miserably. And because Tom Hardy was playing Captain Picard's clone, I do believe, his Romulan clone, and that was meant to be his first big break into Hollywood, and it didn't go so well. No. So ended up resigning himself to B movies like Perseus and the Minotaur, I think there was one called, which was straight to DVD schlock starring Tom Hardy. But this was the one that helped get him out. Now, Tom Hardy did appear in Inception previously, but this...
Dream a little bit bigger is the quote that Hardy's known for in Inception. I reviewed it like a couple of weeks ago on the other podcast I did.
But it was in this movie, we see the return of Christian Bale as Batman Bruce Wayne, Michael Caine as Alfred Pennyworth, Gary Oldman as James Gordon, and then new addition of Anne Hathaway as Selena Kyle / Catwoman, who... I really enjoyed this version of Catwoman. I remember looking at Catwoman and seeing the original picture where she has the night goggles on her face. And I'm thinking to myself, where's the cat is? Mr. Nolan, that's weird, isn't it? Maybe this is the bit where you slip up. And then, of course, I saw when the goggles flip up and they look like cat ears, and I'm thinking to myself, who's again?
Once again, grounded in realism.
exactly, grounded in realism. It was fantastic, and of course Tom Hardy as the mysterious and physically imposing terrorist Bane. Brilliant acting, marred by terrible voice mixing, but still, I think he was one of the best Banes we've had. Certainly, this was the one. Again, this had links to Batman and Robin, where one of the villains in that was Bane, and Bane in the comics is one of the most intelligent villains in the mythos. He introduces Batman's identity. He creates a plan in which to basically tie Batman down so that he can fight him. And he's the only person in the comics up to that point who was able to get one up on Batman and break his back. And in the Batman and Robin, with the late Joel Schumacher directing it, Bane was reduced to a masked goon event, essentially, hired muscle. I think he has like one line in that whole movie which is repeated, which is, and it's terrible. You know, it was one of the things that a lot of people look in visually speaking. Yeah, it looks a little bit like Bane, but it didn't sound like Bane. It didn't act like Bane. It was hired muscle. Here, Tom Hardy as Bane. All right, yes. No venom in this, because of course Bane gets his strength from the drug venom. He pumps it into his body, and it turns his muscles freakishly huge. No venom in this one. It's just good old-fashioned muscle power, but it's still enough to basically knock that man down. It's a good movie. I wouldn't say it's brilliant. Although I almost very much did there. It's a good movie, but. To me, there was just something lacking in the movie. I don't know. I think it just lacks that. There was a time in The Dark Knight where everyone was thinking to themselves, "How is Batman going to win? How can Batman win against this?" And we were emotionally invested. I think the problem with this is that, all right, Bane breaks Batman's back. That's fine. But we all knew Batman was going to get better. And we all knew Batman was going to win. There was no... And I think that's what really dragged the movie down. Bane's a great antagonist, but I don't think there was ever a moment where he was as threatening as the Joker ever was. And that's, I feel, is what dragged the movie down, apart as well as the terrible voice mixing, the Bat voice being taken up to 11. I think that's the only thing that Batman versus Superman got right was about Batman was the Bat voice. But yeah, The Dark Knight Rises, a great send off for Batman, a decent movie. Many people are begging for a sequel. I don't want a sequel. I like those movies as a trilogy. I think Batman Dark Knight Rises, you watch it once, you enjoy it, you never go back to it again.
Yeah.
And I've got Batman and I've got Batman. The Dark Knight. I've not seen The Dark Knight Rises since I saw it in the cinemas. I have no intention of seeing it again because I don't need to. It's a good send off. The Dark Knight is for me where I get off the hype train. Yeah. But yeah, and again, it's forgettable as well because I forgot about its existence until now. So, yeah. Well, anyway.
Around that time, he was also working with Zack Snyder on Man of Steel. He exec produced Man of Steel, so there was a lot of crossover in projects. Syncope were actively involved in projects. He's exec produced a lot of the Batman films up until now. Obviously, now he's focusing on solo projects. But after The Dark Knight Rises, he took a couple of years out to re-gear, restock, and make another movie that was, originally meant to be directed by Spielberg, but then Spielberg dropped out. His brother Jonathan had written the script. So Chris was like, no, I'm going to make my own version of 2001 Space Odyssey. The result was 2014's Interstellar. Nolan goes full sci-fi.
Yep. I mean, Interstellar itself was an epic science fiction film released in 2014, co-written and co-produced by Christopher Nolan. It stars Michael Caine, comes back again, Matt Damon, Ellen Burstyn, Bill Irwin, Jessica Chastain, Anne Hathaway, and Matthew McConaughey. And it's set in a dystopian future, where it follows a group of astronauts who travel through a wormhole near Saturn in search of a new home for humanity. And I do believe this is where Nolan really starts to experiment with time.
Yeah.
in terms of his movies. And it was a beautifully shot movie. I do believe they shot it on 35mm in anthropomorphic format.
Yep, first of all, anamorphic and a lot of sequences in IMAX because it's set in space. You don't have to worry about dialogue as much because you can just mic them up in a better way, and you don't have to worry about the whirring of IMAX cameras because that's the reason why you're very limited in your IMAX sequences. They infamously had to shorten the end credits on the IMAX version because there is a limit to how much physical 70mm film you can have on an IMAX print. So they had to cut the credits down to get it to the 195 minutes that you're limited to on the IMAX format. He's literally pushing projectors to their breaking point in terms of the films he is making. This was Nolan being Nolan. He says 2001: A Space Odyssey is one of the biggest influences he had when he was a child, and this film kind of shows it because you have ingenious camera work, model shots, very little CGI, and all very scientifically driven because he had Kip Thorne on his production team, and this film led to creation of several papers about the depiction of wormholes, all driven by how realistic the visual effects were. They literally threw all the money at the book. And this is a co-production as well. This is the first time that Nolan had to work with another studio in a while because it was a co-production between Warner and Paramount. Because Warner handled the UK rights, Paramount handled it in the States. This was a film where Nolan, again, out-Nolaned himself. But audiences didn't quite enjoy it as much. A, because it's a bloody long film. B, because it's sci-fi, and sci-fi is a bit more of a difficult sell when you're doing an intellectual, high-concept science fiction film. And three, it's Christopher Nolan being Christopher Nolan. Where else would you get Hans Zimmer messing about with church organs for the score?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and hit nail on the head in terms of when you say this wasn't as popular as previous, because it is a very intellectual film. It's very character driven. There are no androids being blown up. There is no sci-fi guns. There's no lightsabers. I think it's one of the same reasons as Blade Runner when it eventually first came out. It wasn't as popular, and now it's heralded as one of the top cyberpunk films. But back then, again, there was. It was Blade Runner was a very intellectual sort of film that was talking about human rights and and androids and how do they have the right to live if they gain sentience. So I think there's a lot of comparisons you can make as to reasons of popularity between Blade Runner and Interstellar. And yeah, you hit the nail on the head there when you say I think audiences. They were expecting something else. They've just seen Christopher Nolan, end Batman on a high note, and they've seen the sci-fi masterpiece Inception. I don't think they realised what they were getting into with Interstellar. It's still a brilliant good movie. Go watch it, but just be warned, it is a thinking man's science fiction. Yeah,
that is literally the best way to describe it. It is a thinking man's science fiction. I remember very, very fondly when I saw it for the first time. It was a Thursday afternoon. I'd just gone down from college. I was the only one in the screen for the film. That tells you how high concept this is. This is 2 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon. I was the only one in there, aside from the staff. And even they were like, we don't understand this film and we've got to sell tickets for it.
Yeah. But I do believe it has a good following, though.
Oh yeah, it's picked up quite a good following since then. They even the day the DVD came out, they played the score for it, synchronised with the film at the Royal Albert Hall with Zimmer in attendance. It is a film that has got a cult following. A lot of people again regard that as Nolan experimenting a little bit more, but this is again Nolan experimenting. This is the thing I love about this man. He is a man who is not afraid to experiment, play around with $200 million, but also make some pretty good movies at the end of it.
Yeah.
And we need more of that. We need more of that.
We do. And then I think in 2017...
Dunkirk. Yes.
Dunkirk was released, one of the greatest war films ever made, and it has been considered Nolan's best work. In 2017, Christopher Nolan depicted the Dunkirk evacuation of World War II. in this epic war movie. It had an ensemble cast that included Fionn Whitehead, Tom Glencarny.
Finn Whitehead, Tom Carney in his... Finn Whitehead, also, big point, this was his first ever movie. He'd done a couple of TV series for ITV up until that point, and then Chris Nolan cast him out of nowhere. He really took a gamble on some unknown talent, including some up-and-coming... I don't know what his name is. Harry Styles?
Yeah. James Darcy, Barry Keoghan, Kenneth Branagh, Cillian Murphy returns, Tom Hardy returns, Mark Rylance returns. This is one of the highest grossing World War II film. It is the highest grossing World War II film, making $526 million worldwide. It received praise for its screenplay, direction, musical score, sound effects, cinematography. Critics were calling it Nolan's best work to date. It's one of the greatest war films. It received 8 nominations at the 23rd Critics' Choice Awards for Best Editing, 8 at the 71st British Academy Film Awards, or BAFTAs for short, and it received 8 nominations, including Best Picture and Best Director at the 90th Academy Awards, which it went on to win for Best Sound Editing, Best Sound Mixing, and Best Film Editing.
He's good with his technical stuff. But Dunkirk was a different film. This is his shortest film today at 1 hour 47 minutes, and he's described this as a British movie with a Hollywood budget. It's a British story that can only be told with a Hollywood budget, because you can't really do the Dunkirk evacuations justice. And he got the timing of the release right as well, because Dunkirk came out July 2017, and I know this because it came out in the midst of the refurb. But six months later, Darkest Hour would come out, and it would, even though Nolan had no involvement, people joked about doing a double bill. Watch Dunkirk in the morning, watch Darkest Hour in the evening, so you get to see how the Dunkirk evacuations played out, both here and over there. It was a good tonal shift, but Dunkirk did a lot of things that no war movie had ever done, because he really made it so you could feel every impact. There is a sequence quite early on in the film where you see him drop a load of bombs, and you just hear the subwoofers kick in on each one, get louder and louder and louder. And also, narrative-wise, this is another thing that Nolan does well with this movie. You've got 3 separate plots running at the same time, and they don't converge until one specific moment in the film. And that, again, confused a lot of casual audiences who were coming in. You've got land, air, and sea. Land takes place over a couple of days, sea takes place over a couple of hours, and air takes place over a few minutes. It is a film that really sort of builds up to this big crescendo where you get to see victory declared. It's a film that, again, Nolan wanted to make it for years. He spoke of doing the journey in the little boats from Dunkirk back to Dover in his youth, and it really shows because it's one of his more heartfelt films. Yeah,
definitely. And to touch on what you said about the the opening bombs dropping, and they're getting louder and louder for the audience to feel the impact. One of the things that Christopher Nolan does very well is that his movies are specifically designed for a cinema surround sound viewing. If you watch it on a DVD, just on a DVD player with your basic speakers, you won't get the full effect. People who have really pumped out their money on cinema rooms really get the Christopher Nolan experience. And you hear the bombs getting louder and louder, and then the closer the bombs get, the louder the explosions are. It makes you feel like you're actually in Dunkirk, basically, watching all this chaos envelop. And again, it received extremely brilliant reception from audiences and critics alike. Cinema Score polled it, and the average grade was an A- from the scale of an A+ to an F. Let's have a quick look. Rotten Tomatoes holds a rate of 93% based on 444 reviews, and the public seem to agree with that as well, with an average of 8.67 out of 10.
Yep.
The consensus on Rotten Tomatoes is Dunkirk serves up emotionally satisfying spectacle delivered by a writer-director in full command of his craft and brought to life by a gifted ensemble cast that honours the fact-based story. And I think that's really or you can say, I don't want to say too much, because again, you need to go out and watch this movie, watch all of Christopher Nolan's movies. He has not made a single bad movie yet, and I don't think he ever will. I think Christopher Nolan is one of those very rare talents where he can do no wrong.
Yeah, I mean, just talking about Dunkirk brings back a big wave of nostalgia, because my local cinema, I mentioned, it got refurbished at the time Dunkirk came out. Dunkirk was the very first film that customers got to use in the new screens. And seeing Dunkirk on screen free with its newly embiggened 7.1 surround sound system was an experience. It was loud. It was loud. But,
I bet it was.
But the big thing now, and this is quite topical given events of the last couple of days, let's talk about the new one.
Yeah. The new one, Tenet, an upcoming spy film being released August the 12th, I do believe.
August 12th, but could move further, knowing the way Warners are playing this. They've said that they're going to go for an extended release, so it's looking like Tenet could play cinemas for a full year rather than 16 weeks.
That's crazy. It's going to star Jonathan David Washington, Robert Pattinson, Elizabeth Debicki, Dimple Gap-Hader, Michael Caine, and Kenneth Branagh. And it is a spy movie that deals with not time travel. It's crazy. I can't remember, because it's not a time travel movie, but it does deal with the way that time flows. And
time runs backwards is the slogan that they're running with.
That's it, yeah. And the operative, which is the played by John David Washington. He is a member of an organisation known as Tenet, and he is tasked with preventing World War III. That's all we know.
That's literally all we know, yeah. Nolan is very secretive about his projects. We don't know anything until they're released. That is why they are making such a big deal about coming to cinemas August 12th. They are making this into an event.
Yep, and of course it deals with time going backwards, as you can see from the title, Tenet, which is a palindrome. So that's absolutely fantastic. And of course it stars Robert Pattinson, who is the new Batman.
I know, it is.
That's worked out rather well.
This was shot before Pattinson was cast as Batman, because Tenet shot middle of 2018, early 2019, and then he was only announced as Batman after this shoot finished. Obviously, Nolan must have put a good word in.
Must have done. Robert Pattinson is a really good actor.
Yeah, he's really grown on a lot of people since Twilight.
Yeah, like, he's done quite a lot, and yes, he was thrust into our faces because of Twilight, because he had a crush on the lead actress, whatever her name is. I can't remember her name.
Oh, Kristen Stewart.
That's it, Kristen Stewart. He had a crush on Kristen Stewart, and that's why he wanted to go for it. And he hates those movies. He absolutely does. And he's done a Tom Hardy.
Yeah.
In that he's built himself back up, and now he's being given a second chance in Tenet and in Batman as well, in the new Batman movie. I think that Robert Pattinson's going to do a bang-up job on this. I think we're really going to see full Robert Pattinson in gear. Yeah. I think it's going to work.
I mean, this is. I mean, Nolan's done it once with Tom Hardy, obviously Inception, and then Dark Knight Rises. I think this could be the moment. Pattinson with a British accent in the trailer, because of course we got a new trailer a few weeks back. I'm looking forward to seeing this film just to see the context of why they crashed an actual Boeing 747 into an actual building, just for the purposes of a film. This is what you get with Christopher Nolan movies. They do everything for real.
Yeah, he doesn't do anything half backwards. I mean, that plane in the opening of The Dark Knight Rises, that plane sequence. Watch it and see.
And the hotel scene in Inception as well, the rotating corridor.
I will not accept anything less than a masterpiece rating from Tenet. Now I know what Christopher Nolan is about. I will not accept anything less. I'm putting this. This has got to be the movie to bring everyone back. So,
well, they are hailing it as the one to bring the movie back, because as it currently stands, this Tenet is the first major release from a Hollywood studio after the cinemas reopen. Because Mulan has been pushed to the 21st of August. Got a couple of independent movies popping up between July 4th and July 31st. But Tenet is being hailed as the movie that is going to try and get everyone back into the cinemas. Whether it works, we don't know. I think Warner are definitely going to lose a lot of money on this film because it's a $300 million movie, including marketing. Yeah. This is where Nolan's status in cinema history could be defined. Could he be the man who kicks off a second wave, or could he be the man who saves the industry from the depths of disaster? We will have to wait and see. But it's a Christopher Nolan movie. It's a Christopher Nolan movie, and I'll be seeing it as soon as I humanly can.
Me too.
It's going to be a good film.
It's going to be fantastic.
I can't think of any words to describe Tenet. I filmed my reaction to the trailer when it came out, and I was shocked and in awe at moments of it. It felt... Another theory that's floating around, people are thinking that this is an underground sequel to Inception.
I can see that. I can see the reasons why people would think. I think it does take things that he's learned from Inception. The idea of taking a genre and adding something like metaphysical to it. So I think that's the word to use. So in Inception, you had the heist movie. Let's add the metaphysical idea of dreams. And in this one, it's a spy film. Let's add the idea of time, of not time travel, but time direction. Let's mess with the directions of time. Instead of something going forward, it's going backwards. Mm. So I am looking forward to it. I think that Christopher Nolan's going to knock it out of the park. My prediction is I think that it is going to suffer budget-wise box office-wise, because it's come out after COVID-19. Everything was COVID cancelled. But I think it's going to be a really great movie, and I think it will grow in time. I think it's going to be what Blade Runner wanted to be, which is brilliant in the cinemas, well-received, and a cult following.
Yeah, I mean, if the rumours are to be believed, we're getting a 2.5-hour movie. So he's back to what he does best. It's just now a case of waiting for this movie to come out. And, of course, I'll be covering it in full over on the other podcast. But here on Ripped Ticket Review, we've got you up to speed on Nolan's work. This is, unfortunately, our season finale. We've done a whole lockdown's worth of podcasts.
We did what was originally designed to keep us going from podcasts, and sadly it has to end due to personal reasons on my part. Long story short, need a job. But thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much, Jack, for allowing me to do this. It's been absolutely brilliant. And who knows down the line what happens?
Who knows?
As the film picks up.
Maybe, because we've not announced, we're going to announce this live on the Facebook, but to everyone watching this on the main TheJackSmit YouTube channel as part of the marathon this year, because yes, Rip Ticket's part of the marathon, who knows, maybe we'll be back in the future, but it's been a brilliant podcast to do this one. I'll be back on Thursday with the main Talking Smit About Film podcast to talk nonsense about the current film industry, but it's been good to go into the archive and go deep into directors who I've not really talked about for years. Guizhou one was good.
Excellent. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
I know, but yeah, that is very nearly it for the Rip Ticket Review. All of the podcasts will remain on the platforms for the foreseeable future, so you can go back and listen to them. We will still continue to plug all the other content as well. But like I say, who knows, maybe we'll be back. Maybe with me having a better setup so we can get proper video and stuff. But that is in the future. With the cinemas coming back online next week, we're going to bow out gracefully and not milk it until we're dry of content. So, until we can get back together, my name's been Jack Smit.
My name's been Dan Carver.
This has been the Ripped Ticket Review. And until let's be real, until there's another lockdown, we will see you at the movies. It's been an honour and a privilege. And, let's get the cinemas back open. We will see you around.
Take care, y'all. Bye.